Have you ever wondered why the silence of a woman unsettles a man more than her anger, her tears, or even her love? Picture it. A woman sits across from him, not pleading, not explaining, not softening the space with words. She simply withdraws her voice, and suddenly the air between them grows heavy, charged like the stillness before a storm. Her silence becomes a mirror, and in it, he is forced to confront himself. That silence is not emptiness. It is power, and for men who seek control, it is both intoxicating and terrifying. Carl Jung understood that silence has a way of piercing the defenses of the masculine psyche. A man projects onto a woman his ideals, his shadow, his fears, and when she refuses to feed those projections with words, he is left alone with the truth of himself. The archetype at play here is the silent oracle, a figure who does not argue, does not explain, does not bow. Her silence functions like a locked door. He rattles the handle, but what unsettles him most is that the key rests in her hand, and she chooses not to use it. When a woman speaks constantly to defend herself, to fill every gap with justification, she loses her mystery. But when she is silent, her very presence becomes a riddle. Men crave that riddle, not because they want to solve it, but because it awakens in them the longing for something beyond their comprehension. It is the echo of the anima, the feminine image within his unconscious, reminding him that the external woman is not his possession, but a reflection of his inner incompleteness. He feels both drawn in and destabilized, caught between desire and fear. Most women are taught to soothe, to explain, to make themselves understandable, but this weakens the silent gravity of their being. The silent oracle does not fight for recognition. She embodies it. Her silence carries weight precisely because it refuses to be transactional. It is not silence born of fear or passivity, but of sovereignty. She knows she owes no man the comfort of her endless words. And so, when she falls quiet, he feels the walls of his own psyche closing in, forcing him to wrestle with the shadows he would rather ignore. There is a reason men return again and again to the women whose silence has cut them deepest. It is not the words they miss, but the haunting resonance of a presence that did not yield. He remembers the night she turned her face away without explanation, and it gnawed at him more than any shouted accusation ever could. For in her silence, she remained untouchable, beyond the grasp of his ego. Like the oracle of Delphi, she spoke not through endless chatter, but through the mystery of what she withheld. The micro-shift here is simple. Resist the urge to fill the void with explanations. The next time you are tempted to defend your value with words, pause instead. Hold the silence. Watch how the room changes. You will see that silence, when rooted in inner strength, does not create distance. It creates magnetism. Because in silence, you stop chasing his understanding and force him to meet himself. This is why silence feels dangerous to men. It undermines the fantasy that they hold authority over the dialogue. A man's ego thrives when he can provoke a reaction, but silence denies him that fuel. In its place, he is left with uncertainty, and uncertainty is the birthplace of desire. The more he struggles to interpret her stillness, the deeper she burrows into his mind. And once she is there, she becomes unforgettable. But here is the deeper truth. Silence is not only for him, it is for her. It is a ritual of reclaiming. In a world that pressures women to constantly explain themselves, silence becomes rebellion. It becomes sanctuary. It becomes a throne upon which no one else may sit. The silent oracle is not merely withholding words. She is declaring that her essence cannot be bought by attention, cannot be swayed by argument, cannot be captured in language. She reigns in stillness. Yet this raises a question. If silence holds such power, what happens when the man refuses to back away, when he lingers in that charged space, determined to crack her stillness open? What hidden dynamics emerge when the silence stretches too long and the shadows grow restless? He lingers restless, unable to bear the silence she carries like a crown. At first he tries to laugh, to break the tension with charm, but the silence does not bend. Then he turns sharp, demanding answers, craving the sound of her voice as proof that he still has sway. Yet she does not break. In that stillness he begins to unravel, because the words he longs for are not hers. They are his own unspoken truths echoing back at him. Her silence becomes a crucible, and in it, his masks melt away. Jung wrote of projection as the great obstacle to love. A man does not see the woman as she is. He sees her through the stained glass of his own psyche. He assigns to her the role of savior, temptress, mother, or betrayer, and she becomes trap. Ed in his narrative. But when she is silent, when she refuses to play her part, those projections crack. She is no longer the character in his story. She is the blank page that forces him to read his own handwriting. And this unsettles him, because for the first time he faces not her, but himself. The silent oracle is not passive in this. She knows the weight her silence carries. She understands that silence is not withdrawal, but confrontation by another name. It is a confrontation not of him, but of the illusions he clings to. When she withdraws words, she withdraws the veil, and what remains is raw exposure. He cannot charm silence. He cannot argue with it. He cannot conquer it. Silence holds up a mirror that refuses to shatter. And here lies the paradox. He craves the very silence that terrifies him, because in it, he feels something rare in the modern world, authentic gravity. He senses that she is rooted in herself, unshaken by his approval or disapproval, and this stirs a hunger deeper than lust. It is the hunger for the feminine as mystery, the eternal riddle that cannot be owned, only approached. Her silence awakens in him the memory of the sacred, of temples and thresholds where men once stood trembling, awaiting an oracle's word. This is why silence, when wielded with intention, becomes magnetic. It draws him into a realm where he no longer dictates the terms. He is accustomed to women who yield, who soften every edge with explanation, but here he finds no such comfort. Instead, he feels himself pulled into an invisible gravity field, one that makes him question, who is she when she does not speak? And more dangerously, who am I if her silence no longer validates me? For the woman, the microaction is simple yet profound. Practice the art of not rushing to respond. The next time someone pushes for an answer, pause. Let the silence linger long enough for their discomfort to surface. Do not fill the space with assurances. In that pause, you reclaim time, authority, and presence. You discover that silence, when rooted in self-respect, does not weaken connection. It strengthens it by forcing authenticity to emerge. But the deeper risk is this. Silence can awaken shadows not only in him but in her. Because silence is not only a tool, it is also a test. The silent oracle must ask herself, is her silence born from strength or from fear? Does she hold her voice as a choice, or has she buried it out of shame? If silence becomes avoidance, it loses its potency. True power lies in choosing silence, not in being silenced. That distinction makes the difference between sovereignty and suppression. Imagine a key resting on a table. He stares at the locked door, desperate to open it, but the key is not for him. The key is hers, and she does not need to use it to prove anything. Her silence is the door itself, closed, deliberate, untouchable. Yet there is danger too, because a locked door left too long begins to whisper with shadows. What happens if she too becomes lost in the silence she commands? What if the oracle forgets when to speak, and her silence turns from strength to isolation? The longer the silence stretches, the more it begins to change shape. At first it was a weapon, sharp and precise, but now it becomes a mirror hall. Every man who enters it is forced to face distorted versions of himself, his pride, his fear of abandonment, his desperate need for control. He sees not her but the fragments of his own reflection. And the more he searches for her in that silence, the more he realizes that she has slipped beyond the reach of his grasp. The silent oracle becomes untouchable, and in her untouchability, he feels both awe and despair. Jung spoke often of the anima, the feminine presence within the male psyche. When a man is cut off from this inner feminine, he projects it outward, placing the weight of his soul onto the women around him. He demands that they soothe him, validate him, complete him. But silence breaks this illusion. In her refusal to answer, she forces him back toward the anima he has neglected. She shows him not what he wants to see, but what he has ignored within himself. And this is why he both craves and resents her silence. It compels him toward a confrontation he has spent his life avoiding. For the woman, this is where the temptation arises to break the silence, to rescue him from the discomfort she has created. Yet the true strength lies in resisting that urge. The oracle knows that silence is not cruelty. It is initiation. It is the invitation for him to descend into his own unconscious, to face the shadows he has projected onto her. She cannot walk that path for him. Her role is not to soften the silence, but to guard it. By holding still, she protects the threshold between illusion and truth. And men who have tasted this silence never forget it. They may chase women who give freely of their words, who pour themselves out until nothing remains, but those women pass quickly. Ram memory. The woman who held her silence, who stood firm as a locked door, they remember her for years. Her absence echoes louder than another's presence. She becomes the unfinished sentence in their minds, the unanswered riddle that continues to pull them back. Yet silence is not only about men. It is also about the woman herself reclaiming her ground. In silence, she is not reacting. She is not persuading. She is not begging to be seen. She is standing in her own presence, untethered to the noise of another's approval. This is what makes silence dangerous, not because it hurts him, but because it frees her. It removes her from the endless cycle of performance. It allows her to inhabit her own mystery without apology. Still, there is a shadow to this archetype. The same silence that empowers can also isolate. A woman who clings to silence as a shield may begin to confuse distance with strength. If she never speaks, she risks cutting herself off from intimacy, from connection, from the vulnerability that allows love to bloom. Silence is powerful only when chosen, not when it becomes prison. The silent oracle must know when to guard her silence and when to break it with words that are rare, deliberate, and alive. That is what keeps her from hardening into stone. So the micro-action here is balance. Practice silence not as retreat, but as choice. The next time you feel pressured to explain yourself, pause, ask, am I speaking because I want to or because I fear what happens if I do? If it is fear, stay silent. If it is sovereignty, speak. In this way, you reclaim the voice without becoming enslaved to it. You learn that silence and speech are not enemies but allies, and the true power lies in knowing when to wield each. But there is still a question that lingers like smoke in the air. What happens when silence no longer unsettles him, but instead awakens something deeper? Respect, reverence, even devotion. What transformation unfolds when he no longer runs from the oracle's silence, but begins to bow before it, recognizing in her stillness the key to his own becoming? He begins to change, almost imperceptibly. The restlessness softens, replaced by a reverence he has never known. The tension that once pushed him toward anger or pleading now bends him toward reflection. He notices the way her silence holds space, how it is neither emptiness nor absence, but fullness, a presence that refuses to be diminished. In that presence, he starts to see the consequences of his projections, the patterns of control and desire that have dictated his relationships for years. Her silence becomes a teacher and he, a reluctant student. Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey of becoming whole by facing the self. The silent oracle's stillness catalyzes it. Men are not accustomed to being confronted without words, yet this confrontation is more potent than argument or persuasion. Every unanswered question she leaves becomes a doorway into his own psyche. He is forced to reckon with his insecurities, his fantasies, and the voids he has ignored. He begins to understand that she is not a prize to be won, but a mirror reflecting the parts of him that must awaken if he hopes to love at all. The danger lies in the delicate balance of presence and absence. Silence must remain a choice, deliberate and conscious, or it risks losing its meaning. A woman who withdraws into silence out of fear or resentment only creates confusion, pain, and distance. But when her stillness is rooted in sovereignty, it becomes a lodestone, drawing the right energies toward her while repelling those who seek to possess. The silent oracle knows that her power does not come from withholding, it comes from choosing to withhold. She measures every pause, every turn of her gaze, every unspoken word as an act of self-possession. This is the subtle alchemy of attraction. It is not seduction by proximity, but seduction by restraint. The less she offers to fill his expectations, the more he projects onto her and the more compelling she becomes. A man's desire is fueled by what he cannot possess, and the woman who holds her silence knows this instinctively. Yet she is not cruel, she is deliberate. In every pause, she tests not his endurance but his depth. Can he face the reflection of his own shadow without demanding her voice to soothe it? Can he respect her sovereignty even when it unsettles him? These are the true measures of his character. For the woman, the microaction continues. Cultivate the awareness that silence is a tool, not a trap. Each moment of withheld words becomes a moment of power reclaimed, a moment to sense the currents of desire, respect, and projection swirling around her. By mastering this art, she discovers that silence is not absence. It is presence intensified. She begins to notice how her posture, her gaze, even her breathing speaks in the language of the unconscious. Words become optional. Her energy becomes the message. Yet even in mastery, there is vulnerability. To remain the silent oracle, she must constantly confront her own impulses to fill gaps, to soothe, to justify. Every urge to speak must be measured against her inner authority. The challenge is not external, it is deeply internal, to recognize that her worth is inherent, not validated by response, attention, or comprehension. True silence, like true power, is fearless. It does not ask for recognition, and it does not rely on outcome. She becomes untouchable not by avoidance, but by presence. And the subtlety of her influence is astonishing. Men who once sought to dominate or control her now find themselves learning patience, humility, and self-reflection. Her silence reshapes the dynamics of interaction without uttering a single command. He begins to understand that she does not exist to fill his expectations, and in that realization, he encounters awe. He cannot own her, he cannot predict her, and he cannot simplify her into a story he already knows. She is a mystery that demands introspection, and in her refusal to perform, he experiences a form of love that is rarer than any comfort he has been given. But this leads to the question that hovers like a shadow over all interactions with the silent oracle. What is the cost if her silence is misunderstood, if her power is mistaken for indifference, if the very men she seeks to awaken are too immature to confront their shadows? Can a woman remain sovereign while the world around her clings to projections, assumptions, and need? Or must she, at times, step forward with words carefully chosen, so that her silence retains its integrity and does not become misread as absence of care? The answer lies in discernment. The silent oracle must read the currents, sensing when her stillness serves awakening and when it risks misinterpretation. Silence is not stubbornness, it is precision. She observes him, feels the patterns of his thoughts, the tension coiled beneath his desire, and chooses whether to speak or continue the unbroken pause. In these moments, she learns that true sovereignty is active, not passive. She does not wield silence as punishment, but as an instrument of clarity, a way to illuminate the shadow in both herself and him. As he navigates her quiet, he begins to question his assumptions. He notices the spaces where he once demanded affirmation and how empty they feel now without her voice to fill them. He confronts the need to explain himself, to justify, to control. The absence of reaction forces him into reflection. Every gesture, every glance, every measured breath of hers becomes a lesson in restraint, a demonstration of how presence alone can command attention more profoundly than 1,000 words. He realizes that attraction is not built on chatter or manipulation, but on the weight of being, the undeniable force of a psyche aligned with itself. For the woman, mastery of this archetype requires not only awareness of him, but of herself. She must interrogate every impulse to speak from fear or expectation, and distinguish it from expression born of authenticity. Her silence is not a wall. It is a lens through which she examines her own sovereignty. Each pause becomes a meditation, each moment of withholding a reaffirmation that she exists as her own center, not in response to his need, not for his consumption, not to be solved. Through this disciplined presence, she enacts the truth that words are secondary to energy, and attention is drawn not to what is given, but to what is held. The shadows of the past also rise in this dynamic. He may test her boundaries, intentionally or unconsciously, seeking to provoke the reaction that will reassure him of his control. And she must endure, because this is the crucible of the oracle's power. Every attempt to disrupt her calm is a chance to strengthen her equilibrium. When she remains unshaken, she enforces an unspoken law. Her worth does not depend on defense, explanation, or appeasement. She discovers that the essence of her presence is magnetic not because it is easy, but because it is unwavering, mysterious, and ethically sovereign. And the effect is profound. He begins to recognize the silence as sacred, not threatening. He understands that it is not emptiness but a vessel, holding both restraint and potential, a conduit for deeper engagement with the self. Her stillness catalyzes his individuation, guiding him to reckon with his unacknowledged fears, desires, and projections. He begins to feel the gravity of a presence ungoverned by his demands. In doing so, he experiences awe, a recognition that some forces cannot be commanded, only honored. The micro-action for her deepens. Cultivate patience and self-knowledge. Practice maintaining stillness not as a game, but as a conscious dialogue with the unseen currents of energy and psyche. Observe without judgment, remain grounded in her essence, and note how her silence influences the room. Each pause becomes intentional, each gaze calibrated, each breath a testament to inner authority. Through such mastery, she learns that power is quiet, authority is measured, and attraction is not earned. It emerges naturally from alignment with the self. Yet even mastery carries risk. Some men, unable to endure the reflection of their shadows, retreat, angered or confused. Others, drawn to her depth, rise to meet the challenge. The silent oracle accepts that she cannot control their reactions, only her own. Sovereignty is the ability to remain undisturbed by misunderstanding, to retain clarity regardless of external interpretation. The moment she wavers, even slightly, the spell of her silence falters. Her strength is absolute only when it is chosen with full awareness and ethical precision. And so the oracle reaches the precipice of a paradox. Her silence is simultaneously protective and transformative, boundary and bridge, absence and presence. In this tension lies the ultimate revelation. The power of the feminine is never in yielding to expectation, but in holding the space for awakening, both her own and his. She teaches without lecturing, guides without intervening, and transforms without touching. The unseen threads of desire, respect, and reflection are pulled taut around her, and those who enter her orbit cannot leave unchanged. But the lingering question remains. When a man finally confronts his own shadows, when he no longer seeks to possess or provoke, how does the oracle respond? Will her silence remain, or will she speak, revealing that mastery is not about hiding, but knowing when and how to illuminate the path? When he reaches that threshold, the oracle senses it immediately. She feels the shift in his energy, the tension giving way to humility, the frantic search for control softening into genuine curiosity. Her silence, once a test, now becomes a bridge. She has held the space long enough for him to meet himself, and in that meeting, he discovers something he has never known. That a woman's worth is not determined by his understanding, that desire cannot thrive on entitlement, and that true connection requires self-reflection, not conquest. Jung wrote that the feminine embodies mystery, and the masculine often fears what it cannot define. The silent oracle exemplifies this principle. Her silence forces the masculine to reconcile with the unknown within himself. He confronts the gaps he has ignored, the contradictions he has tolerated, and the projections he has placed upon others. In facing her stillness, he faces the contours of his own soul, the shadow, the longing, the insecurities that shaped every desire. And for the first time, he sees that the woman before him is not the problem. He is the mirror of his own unfinished journey. Her silence has been both shield and invitation. She has withheld not out of malice but out of precision, allowing him to encounter himself without distraction. And now, as he finally meets that reflection, the dynamics shift. He no longer demands, no longer tests, no longer attempts to provoke. Instead, he bows quietly to the gravity of her presence, recognizing that the space she carved for herself is sacred. The oracle does not smile, nod, or offer words. Her mastery lies in the fact that her silence now feels like acknowledgement, as though the world itself had leaned closer to listen. For her, this is the culmination of sovereignty. The oracle understands that silence is never passive. It is active, deliberate, and transformative. In these final moments, she realizes that mastery is not about ensuring he learns the lesson. It is about remaining unwavering while he discovers it on his own. Her stillness does not bend for comfort, nor does it yield to impatience. It is a throne upon which she sits with quiet authority, a presence that radiates clarity, confidence, and ethical power. Her silence has become the architecture of attraction, the framework of respect, and the vessel for awakening. The microaction here is subtle yet profound. Embody presence in every moment, not as a performance, but as a declaration of inner authority. Watch how people respond when words are measured, deliberate, and infused with intention. Observe how desire shifts when it is not chased but naturally drawn to alignment and depth. Silence, when used consciously, is not absence. It is communication at the level of energy, psyche, and soul. It conveys truth more efficiently than speech, more persistently than charm, and more memorably than flattery. And yet the oracle knows that silence alone is not enough. Timing, discernment, and ethical awareness are her companions. She chooses the rare moments to speak, and when she does, her words carry the weight of her presence. They are not explanations, nor defenses, nor attempts to manipulate. They are expressions of self that illuminate the path she has long held open. Each word resonates with the gravity of her alignment, and those who hear them recognize the difference between voice, born of need, and voice, born of sovereignty. The paradox resolves. She has never been silent to punish or evade, but to reveal the depth of being, to show that presence, integrity, and mystery are inherently magnetic. Her silence awakens, challenges, and empowers simultaneously. Men who once craved control now find themselves humbled by her restraint. Those who approached with assumptions now confront reflection. Desire is transformed from pursuit into reverence. And the oracle herself discovers that silence is not merely a tool to influence others. It is the medium through which she claims her own essence fully. As the sun sets on this revelation, the threads woven from tension, curiosity, and shadow coalesce. The oracle has demonstrated that attraction is not manufactured, that power is not aggressive, and that the deepest form of connection is born from presence, mystery, and ethical alignment. Her silence, maintained with precision and grounded in sovereignty, has become the vessel through which transformation flows, both for those who encounter her and for herself. The lingering reflection is this: in a world that demands explanation, attention, and validation, what would it feel like to inhabit the power of your own silence? To sit unshaken, untouchable, and sovereign, letting the currents of desire, reflection, and respect flow around you without needing to grasp them. The oracle has shown the path, and the choice now belongs to those who dare to follow it. And in that stillness, she feels the culmination of her own journey. The silent oracle has tested boundaries, confronted projections, and reclaimed her sovereignty. Yet the final lesson is the most profound. Power is not in reaction, but in deliberate restraint. Every pause she held, every glance she did not explain, every word she withheld, has become a testament to her alignment with herself. In this, she discovers that attraction, respect, and even love are not gifts granted by others, but responses to the integrity she embodies. Men who once sought to unravel her, who pushed against the edges of her silence with impatience or desire, now recognize something deeper. Their longing shifts from possession to reverence. They no longer demand the story she does not give, because they understand that her story is not theirs to shape. She has shown that presence can speak louder than any declaration, and that alignment with one's own psyche commands more authority than pleading or persuasion ever could. In their awe, she sees reflected the mirror of her own power, a force rooted not in domination, but in self-possession. The journey through silence has also revealed the shadow within herself, for it is easy to mistake withdrawal for strength or stillness for peace. The oracle must constantly interrogate her intentions. Is she silent to control, to punish, or to evade? Or is she silent to honor her inner gravity, to create space for reflection, to manifest presence in its purest form? True mastery emerges only when silence is a conscious choice, executed with awareness, and anchored in ethical sovereignty. Anything less risks diluting its potency, turning power into isolation and mystery into distance. The micro-action that flows from this realization is subtle. Practice the intentional pause in daily life. When provoked, when pressured, or when sought for validation, choose to withhold response just long enough to feel the energy in the room. Let your stillness illuminate what words often obscure. Observe how interactions shift when your presence carries weight without explanation. Through this, the oracle hones her craft, reinforcing that her essence cannot be measured by reaction, attention, or comprehension. It is inherently magnetic, sovereign, and alive. And the transformative moment comes when the man who has been drawn into her silence experiences self-reflection rather than frustration. He begins to sense that she is not withholding out of caprice, but out of clarity. He perceives that she is not a puzzle to solve, but a living embodiment of integrity and depth. The tension he once felt melts into respect. The desire rooted in control shifts toward awe. He recognizes, finally, that attraction is not about mastery or dominance, but about alignment, presence, and reverence for the unknown. Yet even at this apex, the oracle remains vigilant. Silence, though powerful, is not an absolute. It must be wielded with discernment, tempered by intuition and balanced with selective expression. Her rare words now carry resonance because they emerge from sovereignty rather than compulsion. She speaks not to placate, persuade, or justify, but to articulate the truth of her being. And when she does, her words are received not as demands, but as offerings of clarity, integrity, and wisdom. Through this alchemy, the silent oracle transforms the dynamics of human interaction itself. Men who once sought to dominate now encounter limits. Awaken introspection. Women who witness her presence discover the model of self-possession they can emulate. The space she occupies becomes both mirror and catalyst, illuminating unconscious patterns while fostering respect for autonomy and depth. Her silence, paradoxically, becomes the most eloquent form of communication. And so the culmination arrives. The oracle has enacted sovereignty without aggression, commanded respect without argument, and cultivated desire without yielding. She has proven that the true power of the feminine lies not in yielding to expectation, but in holding the space for awakening for herself and for those who enter her orbit. Her silence is not a void, but a vessel, carrying presence, integrity, and transformation. It is both invitation and boundary, absence and resonance, mystery and revelation. As the final reflection settles, she understands this ultimate truth. Mastery is not about manipulation, performance, or pleasing others. It is about alignment with the self, deliberate choice, and ethical presence. Her silence has shaped the world around her not through force, but through gravity, magnetism, and unwavering sovereignty. Every glance, every pause, every word withheld has been a declaration. She exists on her own terms, and the world must bend around her integrity. And in that moment, she recognizes the final revelation of the silent oracle. The woman who knows her worth does not chase, does not bend, and does not perform. She chooses, and everything she touches, even through silence, is transformed.